What's up, guys? Adam from Blue Line here. Welcome to episode 11 of the RamblinFly podcast. Wanted to keep this one short for you today, but we do have a little bit of news on for the listeners. Obviously, you can find this on YouTube, but we just got approved to be on Apple. So by the time you watch this, all of the episodes will be live on Apple Podcasts as well as Google and the other ones that you guys wanted and requested. They're also there too. So if you're driving, doing whatever, check them out on the podcast, or if you're around listening to them at home, hop on over to the YouTube channel and watch them there. But today, Brent and I wanted to do a quick podcast singly dedicated to a question that we got, which is about kind of how do you approach a trout river. If you've never fished there, or maybe you do fish there quite often, or whatever, you're just showing up to a trout river. How do you approach it? What do you do? Start kind of what are you going to start with? If that's not working, what are you going to go to? If that's not working, what are you going to go to? We're not as much talking about water in this episode as much as we are talking about the tactics, the techniques that we would do start to finish until we, I guess, eventually either start catching fish or leave, right?
Yeah, like a general operating procedure that you know, as you find things out about the river, you might change it up. But like, generally speaking, when you walk up to a river, whether it be new or a different time of year or whatever, how do you approach it? And what are the thoughts going through your mind as you're trying to figure this section of river out?
There we go. I think hypothetically, Brent and I kind of came up with the idea that we are carrying 3 rods with us in this scenario. We have a streamer rod, a dry fly rod, and a nymph rod that we are walking with down to the river. So
we're doing speed round. We're going to keep this entire, between both of us, we're going to keep the explanation to 15 minutes. So Adam's probably going to take the first 7.5, and then I'll follow up with my version of it in 7.5 minutes, and we'll have you guys a lot of information packed in as quickly as possible.
So here we go.
All right, you ready to start the clock?
I guess let's get it going.
All right, ready? I gotta figure this out. Tres, dos, uno, go.
All right, so if I just got out of the truck, I'm walking down to the river, ready to start, and I guess I should also say, if I didn't, we're trout fishing, I guess, in this scenario. The question that we received was about trout. So we get down to the river. The first thing I would do is, I guess, if I see fish that are rising, if I see a lot of action on the surface, I don't dry fly fish a ton, but that's probably what I would start with, and I would probably recommend you start with. Or if nothing else, I would run a dry dropper, which would be the dry fly up top and then drop a nymph below. I would probably try to match the hatch somewhat. One of the things that I actually do like to do is if you see a lot of bugs on the water, I think trout, there's like almost overload of food. So I'd like to throw something slightly different, like a cripple or a slightly different color maybe than what's coming on the water, or maybe one that's slightly larger than even what you see, than trying to exactly match the hatch. If there's not a ton going on, matching the hatch can be great. Potentially would either run a double dry or run a dry drop like almost an emerging pattern below, or just a really good general nymph, like a hare's ear or pheasant tail, or I tie a nymph called the slap daddy that I would put on, but you don't have any slap daddies if you're listening to this yet. I guess if I didn't see any bug activity, dry drop still might be one of my choices. If I knew kind of at least had a general rough idea of what might be a good dry fly to throw, some sort of attractor pattern, a chubby, a caddis, a stimulator, something like that's always a good choice. And then dropping a slap daddy. That's what I would drop. Or if, like a guide's choice hare's ear is another really good, it doesn't matter what, fish just eat that fly. That's all there is to it. So could you give that a shot? If I just want a nymph, or maybe the water's is super deep, or if I'm just not getting any, I fish that, kind of dry drop for a little bit. I probably am going to be more interested in changing my depth and my technique before I change my flies. We've all got our confidence flies. I've got flies that, if you tie on a freaking chubby and fish aren't eating it, you just need to go to something else. Like, they're just not eating dries. I would be probably myself more interested in swapping over to running a nymph rig than I would be trying to dial in dries unless I see fish still coming up. Would probably switch over to a nymph rig, bobber. I run swivels in all my leaders. I'd probably just switch all that over to be able to run a double nymph rig. One of my go-to attractor nymphs would be like a turd, like a Pat's rubber legs on the bottom, potentially in a smaller size, depending upon, kind of what's going on. And again, to a pheasant tail, hare's ear, copper john, pretty standard nymph to try to see what's going on, unless like maybe your local shop gave you some good intel on something you wanted to try. At that point, I would probably continue cycling out through the nymphs to find either what's working, or if you are not catching fish, you are not deep enough. You are not getting your rig to the bottom. So re-rig, or just move that bobber up, add some more weight, and get those nymphs to the bottom. If you are not hanging up on the bottom, you're not getting deep enough. More than likely, it is your technique and not your flies. Probably. Could just be the fish too, but if you're not getting deep enough, then you're not there. So I would make sure that I am getting deep enough. So that was kind of down that train of thought between dries and nymphs. If I show up and I do want to streamer fish, I'm planning to streamer fish, which is honestly probably more likely than anything. I generally do like to start with larger flies. I just like to throw larger flies. My go-to colors would probably be white or olive. White and olive is also a good choice if you can't decide. But I like white, especially because I can see it. And if I'm on foot, I really like fishing a white fly so that I can see the structure and everything. I also really like olive, like black, natural colors as well.
You got 2.5 minutes left.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. So I would start probably a little larger, with just one of my confidence flies. Start fishing it. I like to fish streamers closer to the surface if I can. So stuff that doesn't sink super deep, like a cooter brown, one of our patterns, or like even a sculperino would be a great option to start with. Start fishing those. And then if I'm not catching fish, then I'll start downsizing. Steven definitely has a really good saying that we do pretty often, which is downsize for success. So, if the cooter browns are like too big or a Meemaw is too big, then, start busting out like those sculperinos. Madison Sculpin's another great one of ours that's a little smaller that we would switch to. We've got some other really good trout streamers coming out that are a little smaller in that kind of small to medium size range that would be a great one to switch to. So let's start doing that. Then I would start getting those deeper if that's not working. So either adding some weight to your leader, making sure you have a sink tip fly line. There's some casting techniques that you can do to make sure that you get streamers deep with some mends, there's quite a few different things that we're not going to go into here, but it's a great way to get some flies deep. I would start getting those streamers deeper if you're not catching fish, and changing your retrieves, but not more. I would try fast versus slow. And then I would try not exactly your retrieves, but where you're casting. So if you're going to cast upriver, downriver, I would try some swings at that point. Likely, I've noticed that changing color is probably a bigger change than actually changing flies. But if I'm going to change, I would change color and profile. So I would change both of those. So if I'm going to go from kind of a thin, lean, sculpin-y kind of look in olive, then I would probably go big and white, like, switch over to like a cooter brown and white. So essentially that's kind of my progression on approaching a trout river.
That was absolutely perfect. 7.5 minutes on the nose.
Dang. Look at that.
Nice. There was some good tips. So a few things I would have done differently, but I like.
Are we on the clock? Are we on the clock for?
Nope, I'm resetting it. We're taking a 30-second sabbatical.
Okay, for you to criticize how bad I am. Got it. Let's go.
I don't know if it's a criticism, but one thing you didn't mention that I was curious if you think about is, do you do you start with dries, go to nymphs, and then streamer fish because you want to preserve the pool or the section of river that you're fishing? Like, if you would just walk down to the river and throw streamers, you'll probably spook a bunch of fish, and then you won't be able to nymph them.
That is true. Didn't I really didn't do a progression. I did like kind of streamers, or I kind of did dries and nymph
Yep.
line, and then a streamer line. I
Because you'll never do the same in one day.
I
Like, more times than
I
not, you're
don't know.
walking to the river like, I want a streamer fish today.
Yeah, if I kind of go in thinking like I'm gonna streamer fish, then that's what I do. I don't.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't personally. If I'm streamer fishing, I'm streamer fishing. If I'm other fishing, then I'm dries or nymphs or whatever. Is kind of interchangeable there.
Yep.
I'd rather throw dries than nymphs if I can, if it's working. So that's kind of one of the reasons I kind of would start with a dry drop before I go to a full nymph rig.
Nymph rig. Yep.
But no, I think if I'm streamer fishing, I'm streamer fishing.
I like it. I'd say that makes up like at least 75% of the times I go out fishing.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in. I'll give you guys my point of view on how I approach the river, and yeah, we'll get started. Timer starts now. Like we talked about, you're walking up to the river with three rods. You got your dry fly rod, your nymph rod, and your streamer rod. One thing I would say beforehand would be, if you're going to a new river, go on the internet and check out the hatch chart and see what bugs are around that time of year. It'll make your job on the river a whole lot easier. So once you know what hatches are in season, you'll know whether there's even going to be stoneflies there or if there's going to be caddis around at this time of year. So that'll help you narrow down, like, when you walk up to the river and you see bugs hatching, you don't have to say, "Oh, well, is this a caddis, a green drake?" Well, no, it's wintertime. It's not going to be one of those two. It's going to be a midge or a blue wing olive or a Baetis or something like that. So right when you walk down to the river, and like I mentioned a second ago, there's a theory that the least disruptive type of fishing would be dry fly fishing. So it makes sense to start with dries. You're not going to spook any of the fish that are on the bottom of the river. So start with dries. If you see fish rising and you think you're matching the hatch and you're not getting eats, you can do what Adam said and either change to like a cripple or something slightly different. But a lot of times in the Colorado rivers that I'm fishing, the fish will be eating emergers. So instead of tying on different dry flies, I'll usually just drop a unweighted emerger like an RS2 or some kind of Baetis emerger, and that will usually get the job done if I'm seeing rising fish. So once I've decided, okay, I'm fishing dry flies, I've either figured it out with dries or that's not working, then I'll move to nymphing. And I everyone gives me crap for it when I talk to people outside of the state of Colorado, but we fish three nymphs a lot. So if I start nymphing, I'll start with an attractor pattern like a Pat's rubber leg or a turd, and then my middle fly will be a hare's ear, guide's choice hare's ear, or some kind of larger, maybe a caddis type pattern. And then the third fly will be either that emerger or some type of midge. And actually, lately, I've been throwing a lot of like really thin profile Euro nymphs as like either the middle or the third fly. So that's what I'll start with nymphing. Again, like Adam mentioned, go as deep as you can till you start snagging on the bottom, then back it off a little bit, um, and work the entire run from close to you across the current until you get to the other side, top to bottom. That's how I usually do it. But top to bottom doesn't always make sense because the fish are facing upstream, so they could see you and you could spook them. So maybe go bottom to top depending how confident you are and where the fish are. So that covers dry flies and my nymph progression. I guess if I start getting some eats on the nymph, then I'll adjust the rig to, like, if nothing's touching the larger attractor pattern, I'll usually drop that like get rid of the larger attractor pattern, or switch it to like double up whatever they're eating. So I'll have two different depths of what they're eating because your flies are being affected by the current differently. So that'll help you narrow down exactly what depth they're eating at if you can't see them. So dry flies is pretty easy. It's either working or it's not. And usually you can see what bugs are flying around, so you can kind of narrow down your choice. The nymph thing, I like to start off with the three flies. You got the three different sizes: your rubber leg, your medium sized fly, and your small emerger or zebra midge type deal. And that's kind of like my base technical aspect. Once you get past those two and it's not working, I usually go for the Hail Mary and start throwing streamers. I'll either like Adam was saying, downsize for success. I'll prefer to start with a larger fly, but you have to be a little bit careful if you're going to fish the whole run with that larger fly, because if there's fish in there that aren't interested in the larger fly, you'll probably spook them. So streamer fishing, I always start from the bottom of the run and move up. You swinging guys are going to call me crazy for that, but I'm talking about an active retrieve, usually bringing the fly downstream versus swinging it. So starting from the bottom makes sense as far as spooking fish. But yeah, I'll fish like the bottom third of the run if I'm pretty certain there's fish in there and I'm not catching anything on the larger fly. Then I'll downsize, refish that third, and then move up to maybe like the middle third or the upper third, depending on success. But man, that's pretty much it. I went a little fast there.
There you go.
You got any criticisms?
Is pretty similar to what I do, I would say.
Yeah.
Overall. What about stream? Like, so if you put on a streamer and it's not working, what do you do?
I hate downsizing. It's like, I feel like if I'm gonna streamer fish,
you feel like a bitch.
yeah,
Makes you feel like a bitch. If you have an articulated fly on and you pull out some single hook thing, at least like, you know, like the detached rear hook or something. But like if you're fishing something articulated or like that, or like a Sculperino or something, or even a Madison Sculpin, and you whip out like a woolly booger, you're just like, oh god,
yeah, what am I doing?
What am I doing?
Yeah. One of my buddies, who I hope is listening to this, he always is yelling at me like, dude, just try something smaller. Just try something smaller. And he usually is catching a few more fish. Yeah. But
do you ever run the double streamer rig? Like the double like a double woolly booger or a double, you know, sculpin thing, whatever. Usually
not two of the same. I'll usually put a bigger fly up front and a smaller single hook fly behind it.
What about the streamer nymph? You ever do that one?
Very occasionally. I want to get into that more, because you can, like, I think what you're talking about is hanging a streamer under an indicator and then maybe having nymphs behind the streamer. But
no, well, that too. You obviously nymphing a streamer, but no, running no indicator, sig tip line, whatever, to like a sculpin pattern, whatever you're fishing that day, bait fish, and then run a nymph behind it.
Never. The only time I would do that is if it's under an indicator. Have you had success like stripping a rubber leg?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it's kind of like a woolly bugger.
It can be kind of goofy.
Yeah,
I hate, and even what's stupid, I don't get it. I don't understand how you could never ever catch fish like this under an indicator. But if you could do a freaking pheasant tail behind a small streamer and strip the streamer, and they will eat that pheasant tail. I don't understand it, but it works.
Yeah,
sometimes
I'll have to try it.
Sometimes if you're listening,
it just doesn't make sense to me. But
it doesn't make any sense, and I don't know why it is. It probably does work. It makes a little more sense with like a big rubber legs or something.
Because that could look like a leech.
Yeah, a leech or I mean, you know, stoneflies can kind of swim. I mean, they're not just absolutely helpless.
Right. Yeah.
But so I mean, they can kind of get around, so that works too. But or even dropping a worm. You can even drop a worm off the back of a streamer and it'll work. Which is stupid.
Yeah, worms don't swim that fast.
Or if you're
But all
dead,
those bass guys jig
yeah, I
their
know, yeah,
freaking Senko worms.
yeah. Or if you dead drift if you're dead drifting a streamer or a swing, and you still want to fish that streamer too, you could try dropping a nymph off
Mhm.
of it. But anyways,
This is reminding me of when we were in Colorado for Short Bus 3 and we fished the lower Colorado. I was struggling that day. I only caught a few fish on the Euro
yeah,
Euro rod while jigging streamers, and we got a few others on the big, bigger articulated streamers with an active retrieve. But I think it was Bryant and Scotty. They were crushing fish, dead drifting like a 2 or 3 inch olive streamer
yeah, yeah.
on a 7 weight with a sinking line.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
So, yeah,
It worked.
actually, Connor from Golden Fly Shop, him and I were looking it up after. We're trying to figure out what it was. In the lower sea, there is a ton of dragonfly nymphs,
Oh,
and apparently they live to like 5 years or something like that. And they get up to 2.5 inches or maybe 3 inches for a dragonfly nymph,
there you go.
and they're olive. So maybe their sculpin pattern was acting like a
Must be it.
dragonfly nymph. Yep.
No, there you have it. Well, guys, hopefully you appreciated that quick. I know there's a lot of tips. You may have to rewind and listen to that one once or twice to pick it all up, but hopefully you like that. If you guys want to see any other topics, conversations, whatever that you want to hear us talk about, please reach out to us on Instagram at RamblinFly. Shoot us a DM, or leave a comment here on YouTube. Also works great. If you have not yet, make sure you like this video. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel. That really helps us out, helps us create more of this content for you. Brent and I are working on, we kind of have some cool ideas here in the future. So we'd love for you guys to help share the podcast. If you like it, send it to your fishing buddies. It'd really help us out. We kind of want to get it going a little bit bigger so we can have a little more of a following before we do a couple of our ideas. But we've got some cool stuff planned, so stay tuned to the RamblinFly podcast.
Yeah, let us know what you thought about the speed round. I know like a 15-20 minute podcast isn't that normal, but yeah, let us know what you thought about the quick episodes. We're not going to entirely get rid of the hour-long episodes, but maybe throw in a few more of the speed rounds.
We thought this might be a little easier for you guys to handle, and I don't know how digestible the information was. So that's what we'd love to have some feedback on that. Thanks, guys. We'll see you out on the water.